All right. So, welcome to the Diagnostic Working Group meeting on 8th July 2020. To start with, any announcements? No. Then we could go through the regular agenda slated against diagnostics. So the first one in the agenda is item number 401, which is continue unified hooks discussion. I guess this is Stephen's item.
Yeah. So I had a session at the Collaborator Summit. I hoped to try and discuss. Basically, we have a bunch of different hook systems, some existing, some that are emerging needs for things, and there's a bunch of overlap between them. So I hoped to have a session that we could kind of define like what the overlap is and where we can like unify some sort of like API surface that can be shared between these components, just to reduce code duplication and have better performance profile and that sort of thing. So yeah, the session at the Collaborator Summit, I think, unfortunately, was a bit derailed, but yeah, I wanted to try and continue the discussion, just figure out, like try and see if we can put together a list of like what things like need to hook into where, and like what are the particular needs of those hook systems. Like I know like there's several things like FS hooks, audit hooks, like async hooks and things like that, which their particular, like they have some particular needs. Like they need to be able to intercept when something is being called. Some of them need to be able to like stop the call, like cancel the call or something like that. They need to be able to intercept arguments in some way or another. There was a desire for like FS hooks to be able to intercept like calls entirely. So you could do something like create a virtual file system. So like say if you have like a test suite, you want to mock out the file system, you could do that. Yes, there's basically we have these like similar barriers. We need some sort of hooks to what async hooks already provides, which is like we need something at the like init point, but more powerful than what async hooks can currently do, and we need something around the callback, but again, possibly more powerful than what async hooks can actually currently do. It's like we want to be able to intercept the like returns, the returned arguments as well from callbacks. So like say you have like an HTTP request, you want to pull out the status code, things like that. So yeah, just trying to arrange like another session or something that we can just discuss this specifically, just more in depth, and try to put together like a doc of what different people think are needed, and try to find the common points, I guess.
Yeah. So was this the one which you were proposing to discuss in the deep dive meeting the other day? or a presentation of the same?
Yeah. Yeah. I just saw that there was the deep dive meeting, and there seemed to be some uncertainty about what to talk about, but it sounded like there was like possible other topics.
Yeah. I guess for that matter, deep dive sitting is also a good idea, because at this point we are looking at re-looking into the user journey documents and see how much coverage we do have. Is there any realignment that's required and things like that? So definitely, maybe for the next sitting, if you are ready with the content, we can plan for that as well.
For the like deep dive next week. Try to do
Yeah.
that. I think I will be away next week, so I won't
Okay.
be there.
Yeah.
Definitely a future one.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Legendicus.
I'm interested in the topic, so but I don't find any meeting notes from the previous session, and there is no document I can find. So I would be very it will be very helpful if there is any document on the topic, so that I can get started on the topic.
Yeah, there's not super great notes from the session, but just pasted the doc in
Okay.
chat.
Thank you.
It kind of got a bit railroaded because I had spent like a little bit of time over the weekend before just hacking on different API ideas. I just shared in the chat. That was just like some experimentation with like trying to write code to figure out like where the barriers are exactly, what specifically we need. The code itself is not necessarily like any kind of suggestion like this is the API we should have. It's just like trying to just experiment and see what can basically cover what we need. But yeah, I think like putting the link to this in the meeting notes before kind of resulted in the whole meeting just getting derailed into like implementation details of this, even though I was like repeatedly saying that this API doesn't matter, this was an experiment. But, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on issue number 401? All right. So moving on to the next one, which is discuss Node.js contributor survey, item number 398. This was raised by me. Let me see if I can share my screen. Oh. So James has conducted a Node.js contributor survey sometime back, And the one which we see in the screen is a snapshot of relevant portions from that, which is applicable for the um, diagnostics working group. I'm not sure how to interpret these results, but just looking at that, um, my first impression is that it's a mixed kind of result. Debugging test failures, 40% say it's a bit annoying. It's natural because um, given the complexity of the um, diagnostics context of JavaScript, um, the problem determination is still not very sophisticated. So I would say it's aligned with my understanding as well. But this is not giving an indication about what can be improved or what is the areas where you need to focus on, like exceptions or crash or hang. What is the specific debugging scenario where there is a major concern? That kind of a breakup or an insight is not available. Um, how important diagnostics is for you? Around 35% say it's high priority, and 35 another 35% say it's moderately high priority, which is a good news, which essentially means um, high rate of adoption and high rate of adoption in serious and enterprise grade deployment, because only from an enterprise or only on a large scale business grade deployment, people would say that diagnostics is important for them, because diagnostics comes into the play only for such set of folks. So having a good number coming from that angle, I would say, is a good indication. I don't think there is an action from that perspective on us. How do you think the project is doing in terms of diagnostics? Doing well, 40%, needs improvement, 35%. So probably item number three and item number one is what we need to combine and interpret or identify action items which comes in the scope of this diagnostic working group. That's my impression. But any comments or any observations, please?
And my perspective has kind of been that like a lot of diagnostics tools, like it's not really specific to Node, but like dynamic languages in general tend to not be very good at diagnostics in certain categories. Like tracking down memory leaks is a good example. It's like if you look at something like Java or something like that, you can pinpoint like exact memory locations of things, like this memory is being held by this thing, whereas in a dynamic language, like you get a memory leak and it can be quite a pain to track down sometimes. Like at best, you'll usually get like, I have a bunch of this type of thing in memory. I don't know what like each thing contains or any of that, but it's just less user friendly trying to track that down. And I don't know if there's a whole lot we can do about that. It's like V18 could maybe help. That's the one like challenge I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay. So looking at the comments which James posted, one is the inconsistency in various mechanisms. I guess this is something which we, at least in theory, recognized already and are trying to address through the user journey based initiative. Every tooling initiative in the diagnostic working group should be aligned with the user journey, and that philosophy is going to address this aspect of inconsistency, in my opinion. How much we have advanced or how much we have implemented that is still debatable, but definitely we have recognized that and we are acting on that. Performance cost of collecting diagnostic information. I guess this is mostly relevant to the profiling tools, including the heap profiler. I don't know how much we can do about that. Again, this has high resemblance with what Stephen said about dynamically typed languages. When you profile V8 or the execution environment, because of the peculiar nature of the interpreter or the JIT compiler, you need to profile with some effort, and that effort is costing as performance cost for the profiling. Surprisingly, we don't have an issue against these tools saying that I want to profile with this tool, but I'm not able to use because of the heavy performance cost. We could act on it if there is an enterprise user, a user who is using Node.js on a lot of deployments, large scale deployments, and come up with this observation. Probably that's a good driver for us to act on it. I'm not saying that it is not true, but to give it the due priority for acting on it, or looking at what are the performance inhibitors and trying to fine tune and optimize, probably we need to have a more compelling statement around it. Incomplete diagnostic information, I'm not sure what it means. Continued lack of diagnostic use cases to help drive continued development. Yeah, to an extent, I agree. There is no new diagnostic use cases coming as it is, but not sure that how much it is a problem for the working group or the ecosystem as such. If there is no diagnostic use cases new, that means the user base is happy. I mean, the workload is running fine, and nothing new is identified. All the problems are well scoped within the existing symptom types, and follows the same troubleshooting and debugging scenarios. And the last one is instability or bugs in the diagnostic tooling. Yes, we need to align all the tools to the same standard, same quality as that of the Node.js core. Probably we need to align the maintenance, the support, release cycles of the endorsed tools alongside with the Node.js core itself. That's also something which is going to address this.
And I feel like the point 1 inconsistency and point 5 the instability thing both kind of touch on a bit of why I wanted to do the hook unification discussion. Is we already have several somewhat overlapping things. We have async hooks and trace events cover a lot of the same a lot of the same points. It's capturing data at the same places, and they somewhat have similar responsibilities. Trace events captures a little more metadata about what's actually happening, but lacks in the control over the context, and async hooks is kind of the other way around. It gives you the control of the context and not really any metadata. Like if we had more unified system that we could just gather like all of the diagnostic stuff we needed into one place, and like I think we would have a little more control over the performance profile of that, and like, would hopefully have more like unified efforts. People would focus on like make this one tool work really well instead of like developing several different disparate systems that are like, barely maintained.
Yeah, makes sense. Any other points before we move on to the next one? So probably I will keep this item in the agenda for next week as well. Next meeting, when we pick this up for the regular working group, so that we have other members like Michael, Matthias, and then we can probably have a discussion around what should be the actionable items coming out of this survey, this feedback. So the next one in the agenda is discuss usage and support of eBPF 386. I'm not sure who has the action for this. Anton Valley presented the eBPF capability feature in the working group a couple of weeks back, probably a couple of months back. And then the idea was to run it through the user journey to figure out where the capability stands in terms of the kind of symptoms or the kind of diagnostic scenarios in which this can be applied, and then how do we document that, and or how do we look at what are the specific capabilities we want to focus on and things like that. We were never able to do that. That is what my understanding is. So until we are able to make an entry in our user journey document, I think this needs to continue to be tracked. All right. The next one is reviving zones like proposals to TC39, issue number 375.
Yes, I have submitted a next. I have submitted an agenda to the next T39 meetings, so it will be discussed on the T39 meeting on July 20th. And I have changed the proposal to address the issue that we have collected since the last T39 meeting in June. So I would like to request for reviews on the new proposal if there is anyone interested in the async local and async talks in ECMAScript. So the major changes we have presented last time, I can summarize as that we have removed the hooks mechanism from the proposal, and there will be a merely value change listener on the async local. So the listener can do a limited set of the things that we have compared to the async hooks. And so I would like more reviews on the proposal if there is, before next tutor meetings. And this is all for the topic this time.
So if I understand correctly, this is the Sounds project.
I'm sorry, but this is not the link. I will post the link to the proposal.
Yeah, that's pointing to this repo. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Or you share your screen?
Yeah, I have sent the link to the chat.
Okay. Okay. So I'm not sure we can review in this meeting itself. Can we define some timelines or?
I think it's better to review the document offline since the document is it's kind of long and there are many concepts in the proposal, so it's better to do it offline. And I would very appreciate if there is any idea that we can collect for the proposal.
Sure. Yeah. The next one in the agenda is COVID-19 and working group sittings, item number 370. I opened this issue probably 3 months back, in which time the scenario worldwide was quite dynamic and the scenario continues to be like that. I don't see any difference as such, at least in my part of the world. So over the time, we use this item just to reassure, make sure that everybody are okay, and we are happy to continue with the same frequency of the meeting. So if nobody has anything to say, that essentially means all are fine. So we just move on to the next one, which is stable API tracking issue, item number 124. This is a quite old issue, 3 years old. I'm not sure what was the latest on this or what is the action on this particular item.
Don't know that there's too much to talk about at the moment, but we basically created that issue at the time to try and like find a path to async hooks becoming stable. But I think over time, like we kind of came to the conclusion that async hooks itself maybe should never be stable, or if if it does get stable someday, there's like a bunch of things about it that would have to change. Like it currently exposes the resource directly, which like it's exposing internals. And we don't want to make any promises about what internals look like. So, yeah, so that issue's just kind of stuck around forever because async hooks is still not considered stable. And I've worked on some various features to try and make it more usable so we could put in the abstractions we need. So like now there's async local storage. Like most people should probably just be using that because that I do see a path to stability in a reasonably short time.
Okay.
I feel like this note would potentially become irrelevant. But it might be worth keeping just to continue discussing like what else do we need from async hooks? What other features beyond local storage do we need?
Yeah. So that brings to the end of the list of agenda items. Any other issues, any other items, proposals, comments we have? If not, we give back 20 minutes back to ourselves and call it a day. Thank you so much for attending this. Talk to you next week.
See ya.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.